Are you ready to get unstuck from your repetitive daily routine, tap into your mind and body's internal cues, and just discover the things in this world that will lead you to your life's greatest potential? Me too. I'm glad you're here today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Greatest Potential podcast. I am your host, Taylor. And today, I know the title is kind of funny and kind of misleading, but we're actually going to be talking about journaling today. And it's kind of absurd to me that I'm doing a whole episode on this topic, considering if you asked me probably 6 months ago about journaling, I would not have a singular thing to tell you. Like, I believe, if I'm correct, in the pilot episode of the podcast, I was talking about how I have no idea how to journal, or what I'm doing, or what it can do for me. And that was June. And now it's February, and I kind of love it. And I feel like this all just happened kind of organically. So I wanted to share with you my experience with journaling and some of the things that I'm sure you probably have encountered too if you're not a frequent journaler or if you've never even tried. Some of the kind of misconceptions and assumptions that a lot of people have, including myself, about journaling, and how many of those are not based in fact and are just kind of silly assumptions that we have. So I guess just to get right into it, I'll give you the context of where I was 6 months ago and just explain what I thought journaling was, right? So I am a culprit, obviously, if you've listened to the last episode, of being on social media a lot. And every time I would see people on social media posting about journaling or sharing their journals or their notebooks or things like that, I thought it was this big creative experience where people were like poets and they were creating beautiful works of art, not in the form of like a drawing or a painting, but they were crafting like the perfect words and making all this sentimental reflection about things going on in their life, and that they had all this introspection on the world. And I thought these were just the smartest, most talented, artistic, creative people ever. I also was exposed to journaling a lot in settings where we were talking about like religion or mental health or self-care. And now that I journal, I understand why it was brought up a lot in those settings, because it's a really good place to reflect about that stuff. But I never felt a really strong attachment to the religious communities or the, I guess, mental health wellness communities or things like that. I never really felt like I fit the mold that those communities embodied. So I never felt like I was going to be good at journaling, because I thought, oh, it's like all the very religious people, like the people that dive into their Bible, they're the people who journal. Or, oh, the people that suffer really badly with mental health circumstances, like they're the ones who journal. I never thought that me, who didn't see myself as belonging strongly to one of those groups, could have a reason to journal. I didn't think that unaffiliated people had things to journal about. I thought it was this big event that came along with doing something else. I didn't know it could be a standalone activity. I also thought, and kind of looping back to the social media thing, I thought journaling was all about the aesthetic. I was probably in middle to high school when the whole bullet journaling epidemic exploded, when everyone was making these fancy, beautiful layouts and buying the midliner pens, or the mild liner pens, is that what they're called? I don't know. I bought them. I was a victim of the marketing. And it was the bullet journals. People were tracking their habits, doing calendar things, coloring in bubbles for their moods. And it seemed like so much hard work. And I love being creative as much as the next person. I actually really enjoy it. But to me, journaling was just this artistic, creative, intense, thorough thing. And I just didn't have time for that. Like, I didn't have washi tape. I didn't have all these stickers and pressed flowers and everything. Like, it was just too much for me. And I also thought, just in general, that people who journaled knew what was going on. I thought they had it all figured out. And kind of ironic for me to say that when I bring up journaling in the mental health setting, because I know that's like a way that a lot of people cope with things and process through their emotions, which I will touch on later, because a little birdie might have told me that I have dealt with the same thing. Stay tuned. But I thought that people who journaled knew it all. I thought that they were journaling because they had the answers and because they knew what they were doing. And that's why they were writing it down, because, oh, look at this. I found the answer. I have come to my conclusion. I'm going to write it down. And I was just really wrong. I'm not going to lie. All of those misconceptions, I can't blame myself for thinking them, because that's just the way I was exposed to journaling. And that's kind of the perception I had around it. But as someone who does love to journal now, as of recently, none of those things are the case, at least not for me. And I don't know if I'm doing it right or wrong, or if there even is a right or wrong way to journal, which we'll touch on as well later. But none of these misconceptions, none of these ideas that I had about journaling are present in my current life. What it really is, what journaling is for me, is a big old piece of paper where I can just thought dump. Anything that's going on in my brain, anything that I'm wrestling with, I can just put it all in one place on this piece of paper. It's kind of a way for me to talk myself through my struggles, because we can run through scenario after scenario in our brain. And I know I've mentioned this a lot, but if you have anxiety, it's honestly very common to think about every single possible way a situation could go and replay it and analyze it and obsess about how you reacted and things like that. But journaling for me is a place to do that doesn't involve these thought loops or these thought cycles that kind of bring us back to the same unhelpful thoughts every time. It's kind of a place where it's on paper, it's not going anywhere now. So I've thought what I wanted to think, I've decided on what I want to write down with my hand, and that's what it's going to be. So as opposed to me thinking I had to have it all figured out before I write it down on the paper, it's actually been a way to help me figure out what I want to figure out because I'm writing it down on the paper. So, last but not least, it's really just an external place for my brain to live. I have a lot going on in my head almost at all times, and it gets really loud in there and really crowded. So I found that once I started journaling, it's not always about knowing the answers. It's not always about having anything purposeful to say. It's not always about having a revelation or something I want to manifest or a big goal. Sometimes it's literally just, I don't want this information in my head right now. I'm going to write it down so that it has a place to live that isn't in my brain space. So those were kind of my initial misconceptions and the things I've learned since I started journaling. But I do want to just address, because it's so easy when you think about journaling and you hear people talking about it and you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. It's working for you, but I'm different. It's not going to work for me because of XYZ. But I do want to address some of those things because I was that person. Genuinely, I'm not lying, 6 months ago, and if not more recent, journaling wasn't working for me. I didn't think it was working for me because I had the wrong ideas about it. So I just want to make it very clear. I thought some of my facades around journaling were that you have to know something, it has to be presentable, you have to have some wild conclusion that you're making, and it has to be pretty or aesthetic. But let me remind you, the only way that people are going to see your journal is if you're posting it and sharing it and making it public knowledge. Think of it as like a diary when you were little, right? Like, that was your pride and joy, and you had a little lock code on it, and no one knew it, except for maybe your BFF, right? And you guys would write secrets in there, and there was no one else ever going to lay eyes on those things unless you wanted them to. The journal is the same way. No one has to read these things. No one has to talk about them with you unless you want to bring it up, unless you invite that conversation. So I just wanted to address those because, again, I was someone that believed them, and I know if there's one more person like me out there, you're probably going through a similar thing. So now that we've set that groundwork, I want to invite you to try and journal. I know that it probably won't be for everyone, but on the off chance that it is for you and you haven't given it a solid try yet, I do want to give you some of the tools and challenges that I overcame in my discovery that I like journaling. So hopefully it makes it more accessible to you and you don't have to go through these same roadblocks to get to the same place that I'm in now. So the first roadblock I ran into pretty much right away was the price, the sheer price, and how expensive journals are and like the utensils that you would use to write in them. So again, partially because I was fed all my information about journaling from social media and all these like religion camps and things like that, I thought that journals had to be these fancy hardback books with like a nice layout with prompts and things like that. And don't get me wrong, there are really, really cool, great journal options that have these things that are expensive, that are hardback, that are like professionally bound, that have daily prompts and things like that. But it's not completely necessary to get into journaling to have something like that. Maybe for you, it does help to have the prompts right there, and all you have to do is read the page and answer the questions. But it's not mandatory. And you know what else is not mandatory is getting the special pens that are like no smear and fine ink and 0.7 gel tip, blah, 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 XYZ, ABC. None of that is necessary either. Because again, all of these journaling posts I would see, or the people that share their stationery and things like that, all of them had consistently these fancy, sleek pens and pencils and highlighters and all these different knickknacks that they would use, and none of that is necessary either. And like I said, I am an aesthetic girly. Like, I love when things look pretty, and I was the over-the-top note taker in high school and college. Like, I was the color-coded girl. I was doing these highlights and boxes in the middle of my notes. But journaling does not have to be that way. And I actually prefer that it's not that way because it makes it feel more authentic to me, because I'm not sharing these with anyone else. I don't intend for other eyes to be on this work. It's really just for me. So all of the aesthetics, all of the fancy, expensive brands and layouts and things are absolutely not necessary. And I'll tell you, what I use for my journal today is literally a leather-bound, like dot-lined notebook that I got for free at a work event last year. And the pen I use is an erasable pen off of Amazon because I don't like scribble marks, and I don't trust myself that I won't make a mistake. So I literally have this like mid to low quality erasable pen and a free journal from a work event. So it's like, I still feel like I have plenty of the benefits from journaling. And I spent, if we're counting the entire pack of pens, which came with 10, I spent $8.99. But considering I'm using a singular pen, I spent less than $1 to start journaling. So it can seem like an expensive hobby. It can seem like an expensive practice to pick up, depending on where you're getting the information from. But I'm here to tell you, it can be as cheap as free if you really want it to be. So then once we get over the costs associated with journaling, once we found a way to make it accessible to us in terms of costs, it then becomes a question of, where do I start? I have no idea, especially because with the context I gave you at the beginning, everyone that I knew that was journaling, or every time I was exposed to the practice of journaling, these people had been doing it for so long, or they just seem good at it to me. I don't know if these people had their therapist teach them how to journal, or if they had mentors in the church or things like that that showed them the ropes, but it felt like every time I encountered the topic of journaling, everyone had it all figured out. And I was worried. I didn't want to feel like my thoughts and feelings were just so jumbled, or that nothing would change if I wrote it down because I've already spent so much time thinking about it in my head. And that's kind of how I felt at the beginning of journaling. I was like, well, not at the beginning, but when I started to want to get into journaling, I was like, well, what's the difference if I write all this stuff down? What's the difference if I write down that I got nervous when XYZ happened today? Because I've already processed that in my brain. But I will say that there's a big difference between processing something completely internally in your brain and having the chance to put it elsewhere, for example, in this case, on a sheet of paper. And so I really wanted to know how to do it right. And again, I was still a little bit misled, thinking that journaling had to be prompts and had to be scripted and things like this. So I started by actually Googling journaling prompts. And I ended up stumbling across a podcast episode, which I will link it in the description of today's episode because I thought it was so insightful. And I believe the speaker was Joe Dispenza, and I don't know if that's how you say it correctly, but he's this big mental health and kind of spiritual awakening public speaker, and I think he has his own podcast and content, and he might have done a few TED Talks, but the episode that I'm thinking of was kind of how to unlock your greatest mind or something. Can you tell that he was an inspiration for this podcast at all? But I remember the episode was talking about journaling in some aspect, and it was a while back, so I can't remember exactly what it was that he listed out, but he did give a very distinct journaling prompt, and there was actually a link in the show notes of this episode that sent me to a downloadable PDF. It was completely free, and it had daily journaling prompts as well as kind of a workbook to guide you in what to answer these prompts with. So that's just one example, but I promise you, if you just Google journaling prompts, I can guarantee you between Google Images, between Pinterest, Etsy, and various other free resources online, you will find some prompts that will help you get started if you don't feel comfortable just going straight pen to paper and just writing your thoughts. Because I didn't at first. That kind of made me nervous, and I didn't know if I was going to do it right or wrong, which there is no right or wrong. We'll touch on that again soon. But I felt at the beginning very comfortable with the prompts because at least I knew I was answering a question, and at least I knew that, hey, this professional guy told me this would be good, so this is a good place to start. So that was something I really enjoyed, was starting with the prompts. Another thing, now that I'm a little bit longer into the practice of journaling, I sometimes pull inspiration from my past entries, actually. So I had a stint last year, probably last fall-ish, I want to say around September, October, where I dove headfirst into the journaling. That was when I pulled these prompts from Joe Dispenza's podcast, and I was really diving into it and all this stuff. And then I just got really busy with life and other things going on, and I put journaling kind of to the back burner. But I wanted to pick it back up again this New Year's, especially because of my whole revelation I had with the yoga class and the manifestation and things like that. So when I picked it back up, I felt different this time. I knew that I didn't want to just do the scripted prompts anymore. So I actually started back from when I began the journaling journey, and I read every single entry from day one until the present. And it was actually really inspiring and kind of spooky but cool reading my past entries, because I could see the growth and development from entry to entry and day to day from all the previous entries, even though I didn't feel like in the moment I was drastically changing anything in my life or doing things to improve. But I was noticing that as I would journal something, I would then feel better equipped to handle it the next time I would journal about that same topic or things like that. So for me, when I picked journaling back up again at the beginning of this year, I was pulling inspiration from my very own past journal entries. I was like, okay, cool. I really like how I spun this topic, or I really like what I wrote about this, or I really liked the way I was vulnerable about feeling this way. I'm going to try to embody those things in my current entries. So that's something that obviously you'll have to get a little ways into your journaling before you can draw from your own previous entries, but it is something that I did find a lot of inspiration from after I felt like I had outgrown the prompts situation. And then this is something that I don't know if it's official. I don't know if it's something that's actually recommended in the terms of journaling, but something I think about when I have been doing my entries lately is pretending that I didn't have a boyfriend or best friends or parents or anyone that I would text with juicy updates in my life or dramatic emotions that I'm dealing with. Like if I didn't have those go-to people that I would typically text or call or have a conversation about these feelings with, those are the topics I try to pull from when I want to do a journal entry. So like tonight, for example, obviously I have my group of friends that I can send a message right now and talk about how I'm feeling. And obviously I have my parents that I could shoot over a message if I'm concerned or worried about something. And obviously I have my boyfriend who literally lives in the same square feet as me. So I can turn over to him and be like, hey, what do you think about this? But in the case of my current stage of journaling, I try to sometimes pull from all those things that I want to share with them right in the moment. If I didn't have them to share it with, how would I word it? How would I talk through it if all I had was myself to talk through it with? And then I might journal about that for the night. So again, that's just a very personal example, and I don't know if that's actually recommended in terms of journaling, but if you think of it almost like a private group text between you and you, it's kind of cool the way that your thoughts will create themselves and spin it in kind of a conversational way. So that's a really cool practice that I've liked lately. So then I'm going to get into the final sort of roadblock that I had going into journaling that I've now kind of overcome. I still battle with it a little bit, but definitely have gotten a lot better with it. And that's just the question, am I bad at this? Am I good at this? Am I doing this right? And I've alluded to this a little bit throughout the past few minutes, but first of all, there is no bad or good. There's no journaling correctly. There's no journaling incorrectly. You have a sheet of paper in front of you and you have a utensil to write with. That's journaling. If you draw, mash, if you play tic-tac-toe, if you're coloring a picture, that's really all forms of journaling in a different sense. And I haven't pulled up the Google definition of journaling because I don't feel like it's super relevant, but if you did, I don't think it specifically defines that you have to be writing script or talking about your thoughts or talking about anything relevant, really. And at the end of the day, like I mentioned with the diary situation, right? No one's going to see this. No one's going to, unless you choose to show them, which that's powerful if you do, and I really respect that. But no one's looking over your shoulder at what you're writing in your journal. It's not broadcast to the world unless you choose for it to be. No one's going to look at you and think, oh, she's an amateur. Oh, she's wrong for journaling. Oh, he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to process his emotions. Nobody is going to think that. And even if you do share your journal, chances are you're going to be an inspiration to someone rather than the butt of their joke. So I promise there's no such thing as being bad or good at journaling. That is something that I really had to get out of my head and just full send myself into it because no one's going to see it. At the end of the day, it's really like an adult diary. And if you're not an adult, it's just like a diary, like really at any age. There's no right or wrong or specific list of what you're supposed to write in your diary. It's really just an authentic place to talk about your crush or talk about what's going on in life. And that's kind of the way I like to spin my journaling recently is I just treat it like, hey, dear diary, this is what's up. And I've been getting a lot more conversational with it because I like that style and it feels more natural to me. So I've kind of been making references here and there about that. But I write to my journal as if I'm writing to someone, as if I'm having a conversation to someone. And I recently found out, this is a bit of a tangent, but I recently found out that not everyone hears their voice in their head when they're reading, or not everyone can like visualize thoughts when they think it. And I promise this is relevant, but I heard recently that, for example, like if you tell someone to imagine an apple, some people don't actually see an apple in their mind when you tell them to imagine an apple. Or some people say, oh, can you read this passage in your head really quickly and then tell me what you thought of it? Like there's some people that will just look at the words and I guess they're reading it, but they don't hear their own internal voice like reading the words. And when I found this out, I was shook. I was like, wait, you mean to tell me that, like, how do people dream then? How do they think? How do they have internal dialogue? Turns out some people don't have internal dialogue, which was crazy for me to find out. But the reason I mentioned this, and the reason I even brought up this tangent, is because for me, I do have an internal dialogue. So the way that I've been doing my journal entries recently has been me talking to me. So when I'm going through things in my head, and when I'm processing things in my head, I am hearing my own internal voice. And I don't know if it sounds exactly like my voice. I just want to give that disclaimer out there. I hear a voice. I don't know if it's mine. It's certainly not like Johnny Depp or anything weird like that, but it is a voice. And the way I've kind of created my journaling experience, at least as of now, is me writing in the point of view of that internal voice. So it reads kind of conversational, and I prefer that. But again, to go back to this roadblock of, am I bad or good at this? Who cares? And who knows, honestly, because there isn't really rules when it comes to journaling, which is the coolest thing. And I highly recommend, if you have past diaries or journals or things like that from when you were a kid and you want to get back into journaling, if you have access to those things, go read them, because one, you're going to have a hell of a time just reading back through what younger you was thinking. Even if it's not that long ago, even if it's you from like a year ago, it's still so interesting to see what we were going through and what we were thinking in those times. It's almost like a time capsule in a sort of way. And it's really cute, especially if you have one from young childhood, to just see the way that we've developed and we see the world differently now. So if you have old ones, highly recommend going back and reading them. And if anything, you'll just get a good laugh out of it. So on that note, kind of to wrap up, I want to talk about some of the things that have happened in my life since I've started journaling. And then I'll kind of give some last minute pointers if you're absolutely stuck and you don't know what else to do. Here's what I would recommend to journal. So since I've started journaling, and like I told you earlier on, I sometimes can look back at my previous entries and pull inspiration or just learn from the space that I was in when I wrote that entry. And something I've been noticing, which is really spooky, is I have unintentionally been manifesting or creating the life or the experiences or the emotions that I want to have without even realizing it. So I'll give you an actual example from my journal, which I told you I'm not sharing this with the world. I'm not sharing the whole entry with you, but I'm just going to share the thing that happened. So it was mid to late winter of last year, probably around November or December. And I had journaled that I wanted to allow myself to feel my emotions more. I felt like I was putting up a wall a lot. I felt like I was trying to damper down things and not feel them as strongly as I actually knew I would. I knew that I wanted to have a bigger reaction to, and I really wanted to just like have an emotional release, but I didn't know how, and I didn't feel comfortable doing it when I was constantly surrounded by other people. So that was something I journaled about. I was like, yeah, I wish I could react stronger to this, but I just don't have the space, or I don't feel comfortable to react strongly to this. And then it was really cool because as I was flipping through my past entries, it was like 4 entries later, and this is when I picked journaling back up at the beginning of this year. One of the things I wrote that I was grateful for was that I had the space and the ability to loudly and truly feel my emotions. So it was like in the course of months, I didn't intentionally go out of my way to like feel emotions stronger or be more affected by things or be louder with my feelings. It just, through me journaling and through me putting that thought externally onto the paper and not living just in my brain, I think it gave me the space to actually realize it and actually do it. And in all honesty, like, I completely noticed a shift in the way that I've been expressing my emotions and processing things from even long ago through me journaling about them. So that has been really kind of spooky, but very cool that these things have, that's just one example. There's been many more. But how these things that I want for, wish for, or want to embody that I'm journaling about in past entries and then I flip forward, or I just look at my present life and I see that I have done them, I have achieved them, or I have created them. So it's very, very cool. That's one thing that's happened since I've been journaling. Another is just having more peace and closure with my emotions and with my feelings. So like I've alluded to again multiple times in the episode, with anxiety, I tend to play and replay and adjust, and I'm almost like a movie editor in terms of my memories or my feelings or situations. I find the parts I like, I find the parts I don't like, and I really try to like tweak and dwell on those things until I can make the quote unquote perfect scenario in my mind, and then I'm like, okay, cool, I'll do that next time. But it really doesn't always play out like that. And I've definitely been better about it in recent months, but I have in past times spent a lot of time dwelling on how things could have gone, or how things should be going, or how I wish I was reacting to something, or how I wish things were going. And sometimes I beat myself up over feeling an emotion over something. And sometimes I beat myself up or get so hard on myself because I didn't do something I wish I would have. And prior to this journaling situation, a lot of the times I would either vent to my friends about that, complain to somebody about it in my life, or I would just keep it in my brain and it would go somewhere else to live. And since I've been journaling, I've been intentional about trying to put that stuff down on paper and be like, oh, I'm so mad I did this, or I felt like this today and I don't know why, and I'm annoyed that I had that reaction because XYZ. And it's like me writing these things down and sharing, look, I snapped today and I'm not proud of it, or I got really upset and nervous today about something that I haven't gotten upset or nervous about in months, and it really made me sad that I lost progress. So it's like, rather than me just thinking I've processed with it and moving on while it's living somewhere in my brain, I think I've gotten just a lot more sense of peace and closure with how I handle things, how I express my emotions, even just like little petty things in life, like me leaving out my laundry for one extra day. I journaled about it because I was like, this is embarrassing. I want to be better at putting my laundry away. But when I journaled about it, I was like, okay, wait, I'm running on 2 hours of sleep and 20 hours of activities. And with these other 2 hours, I don't want to use it for laundry. So it's like, just by me expressing it and putting it on paper, I feel like it's allowed me to just have more, like I said, peace and closure with a lot of different things in life. So that's been a fun, unintended result of journaling. And then finally, I would say it's just been a good way for me to vent, so I'm not letting it out on other people constantly. And I really want to do more research into why sometimes I feel like I can be an oversharer, or why I want to let people know some of my deep dark secrets all the time, because there's got to be a reason for everything, right? And I'm really curious to like research and see if there's a reason why I love to share so much about my feelings in my life with people. But oftentimes there are things that I know really, really don't affect the other person that much, and sometimes I just want to talk about it. So I feel the need to bring it up and be like, oh my god, hey guys, like, this is how I responded to this situation today. Like, isn't that crazy? And really, is it going to impact their lives? No. Are they going to be supportive friends by listening to me? Of course. But it's not their job to get all my drama and all my tea and everything. Obviously, they love it. They love to hear it sometimes. But it's not their job to be my dumping grounds for all the things I'm going through. So I found that if there's things I don't want to burden other people with, or there's things that I know won't really impact the other person's life that much by sharing it with them, those have been things that I've been journaling about. And honestly, it feels really, really good to have that safe place for me to put things and feel still like I was able to get it off my chest without having to, again, involve someone else or make it a big deal or make it a whole situation, when really it's just me trying to work through something. So that's been a really, really nice unintended result of me journaling. It's just feeling like I have a space to vent and dump things on without having to bring negativity or anxiety or any emotions really into people's lives that don't need it. So, a couple tips before I leave you. My first tip is a lot of sources will recommend, even if you don't feel like doing a complete journal entry every single day or every single week or whatever that cadence looks like to you, I do recommend starting or ending almost every day with something that went good that day, something you're grateful for, or something that you're looking forward to the next day. And I know this sounds very cheesy, and trust me, I've definitely been in places before where I don't think physically it is possible for me to find something I'm grateful for, or find something I'm looking forward to, or find something good that happened that day. Trust me, I have been there more times than I would like to admit, and I know that if I was listening to this podcast during those times in my life, I would have laughed, turned it off, and then never did anything about it. But me not currently in that state of mind, and me on the other side of things, knowing what life was like before, during, and after those periods. I want to say, if you can scrape the surface, if you have to grasp at straws to find something that was good about your day, or something you are grateful for, or something you can possibly look forward to tomorrow, I really encourage you to at least start there. And it doesn't have to be physically journaling either, right? If you just wake up in the morning, and sometimes it's hard, but maybe it's before you go to bed, or maybe it's over lunch, or just at some point in the day, try to think about one of those things. You don't have to write it down, but just try to let it sit in your brain. Be like, okay, you know what? Today was the worst day of my entire life, but I'm looking forward to tomorrow hopefully not being as god-awful. That's great. Like, honestly, that is enough to get you through and push you through to the next day. Or maybe you feel like you just got dealt a shit hand recently and it's hard to find something that you're grateful for. But think about it, you're in the middle of all the chaos, you're on the verge of a mental breakdown, and you're literally just like, oh, you know what? I'm grateful for coffee because I would not be processing right now without it. That's great, because that's something in your life that gives you hope and gives you something to be grateful for. So many sources and so many mental health people and all these TED Talk people will always tell you gratitude gets you a long way, and so does positivity. So again, like I told you, if I was in that place I was, where nothing seems like it's going to be better and there's no hope and everything sucks, I would be annoyed right now. I'd be listening and be like, yeah, easy for you to say when you're in a great place, but please humor me this. Try it. Just try it out. Find something you're grateful for, even if it's, you know what, I'm grateful that my hair didn't tangle or pull when I brushed it today. The littlest things will get your mind thinking bigger and bigger the more you do it and the more often you practice it. And I feel like that's kind of what's developed with my journaling journey so far. Is it started with me on these very scripted prompts and using 1 to 2 word answers, and now I'm at a point where I'm having conversation style messages in my journal with myself, and it's so cool to just see the evolving and the developing of that in such a short amount of time. And if you'd asked me 6 months ago if I was going to be a journal girl, the answer would be absolutely not. I would have thought you were silly, and I'd be like, girl, why are you bringing your journal with all this stuff? But now I'm like, oh my gosh, I literally took a trip to Wisconsin a couple weekends ago, just like with my dance team and my friends. And I brought my journal with me. Like, that would have never been me. So it's something that's really cool, and it's going to take practice, and it's going to take a little bit of time on your end and a little bit of effort. But if you really care about it and you really want to just humor it and give it a try, I highly recommend it. Hopefully you take some of these tips from this episode and just kind of apply them. But honestly, if you just do a quick Google search of like quick way to start journaling, or prompts to start journaling, or how to do a daily gratitude situation, typically they're pretty helpful, and a lot of them will be kind of the same sentiment. So like I mentioned earlier, I will link Joe Dispenza's podcast that kind of got me started in journaling in the notes. You can probably download his whole prompt thing from there if you really want to, but again, super easy to just Google it. And if you are a big journaler, I clearly am very new to the process, and I'm still figuring out, I'm still exploring. Like I said, you can't be good or bad at journaling. But if you're someone who really loves journaling and really enjoys it, drop me your recommendations. If you have a really good journal you like, or some really good prompts that you feel like get your brain working and just get your mind off of things, send them my way. Also, honestly, at this point, send me if you have any writing utensil recommendations. I love a good smooth pen. I'm probably not going to ditch my sturdy Amazon erasable pens, but hey, I might be willing to try something out new. So let me know all of your recommendations and suggestions. I'm super open to hearing them. And thank you so much for being here today. Like I said, I am a journal newbie myself, so I'm not the source of all truth. So please, if you are interested in getting into it, don't take this as the final word. Definitely do some research, explore around, maybe even hop on social media if you want to and explore some of those pages. Don't get too caught up in it though, because again, it can be really misleading when you see all these beautiful fonts and layouts and artistic things going on in the journals. I promise it doesn't have to be that deep, unless you want it to be. So I appreciate you being here, and I will see you all in the next one. Thanks. Bye.